Before I begin talking about um, what we'll be doing precisely today, I would like to remind you to get your paints wet now, because if your paints are wet and moist, they will be easier to paint with. So before I say anything else, I have I'll hold one of these up. I have a squeeze bottle and I missed it. If you don't have a squeeze bottle, maybe you have a dropper. If you don't have a dropper, just put a little bit of water in each color of paint. So when you want to get a little bit of that, it will be easier. And if you forget to do it or you don't put enough in, this is not a biggie.
If you just squeezed some of your, there were 3 colors I didn't have in my palette and I just squeezed it out of the tube, would you
Then
want
they're
that?
wet. Then
Okay.
they're wet.
Okay.
But I did not, all of these palettes are anywhere from 2 days to 5 weeks or even older. I always have a bunch of different, oh, I'm going to do this with this color. I always have a bunch of things going on. Okay, so this is a finished picture. This shows the different strokes and colors I made in order to get there.
We see your view of your phone very small on the screen. You know, like taking up, say,
Unfortunately, it's not going to be a full screen because it is the phone. So it's
okay.
going to be a vertical view.
Okay, got it.
Okay. If you decide you want to make one or two, that's fine too. Whatever you decide to do is fine. It's important when you're working with watercolor to know what your colors can do. So what you see here is just a simple, I put one dark blob of the color and then pulled it out with water. And let's spend a little bit of time doing that. I don't think we'll do it every color, but we can do it with a lot of colors. And this will give us a chance to experiment with pulled work. I call this pulled work. I've been looking in watercolor books for, is there an official term for this? I think I better put on a smock if I don't want to get paint all over me. If you need to take a minute to put on an apron, if you're concerned about getting paint on your clothing, do whatever it is you need to do. So I'm not going to do this with all my colors now because that's really tedious to watch. So here's a nice deep, this blue almost looks black, right? But then I'm going to get all the paint. There's still a tiny bit of blue in there out of my brush. And what I want to do is I want to pull the color. I want to make a gradient there. I want to know how intense my color is. And I want to know what it looks like when it's pale. Another word for color with a lot of water in it is a wash. And we'll definitely, you can see when I'm doing a shadow, I'm using a lot of washes. You can see in the, I have to pick that one up later. In the pale parts of this, I'm using a lot of washes. Now, if you've done a lot of watercolor work, you already know how to do a wash, but if you haven't, good thing to practice. So what I'd like everybody to do now is with your already wet paints, with as many colors as you choose, you know, like with 3 or 4 colors, make your darkest color. You can see that green has much less intensity. It's not going to stain, you know, it's not near as dark as that blue, but that's still a nice color. It's still, you know, that's going to be fun to do something with. So start exploring your palette a bit. Your colors will all have different qualities, different intensities. And as you're doing this, think about the colors that you might want to use for a snowdrop, because that way you will be familiarizing yourself with your tools. So I chose to put these 2 yellows together because I suspected that this yellow is kind of not that strong and intense. And look at how much more intense this yellow is. Look at how it kind of sings and that one retreats. So again, it gives me more tools. What greens do I have? So I've got this really sharp green. So it seems to me somehow,
I'm having trouble pulling the color like you did.
well, so this is a bunch of water, so you can't see it. And then I just stroke it.
Oh, you wet the paper?
You can wet the paper, or you can just do it with my first stroke. Probably not something I'm going to use with snowdrops. What do you think? So there's my dark color and it's wet. This is my brush with lots of water. And I touch it. And I call this pull work because I'm pulling it out.
Have you taken the paint off your brush when you're, washed your brush?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You put down a drop of color and then you cleaned your brush so you could.
Right. So this is black. The black, I'm going to have to move out. The black is, you guys can see me. The black is still on my brush, right? You can see it's on my brush. I am watching someone wash brushes is not very interesting, so I'm off camera for that. But as soon, there's nothing on my brush now. You can't
Right.
see anything, right?
Right.
But as soon as I drag it, you know what it's like? It's like when you have a stain on your clothing and, you know, you get some food on your clothing and you begin to try to wipe it away and it just gets bigger and bigger, you know, because you're spreading out the pigment. What I'm doing is I'm spreading out the pigment. I'm spreading out the pigment in a controlled way. I want to have my most intense pigment going to my least intense pigment. And as you can see, in a pale color, there are fewer steps between the most intense, the darkest, and the lightest. Does this make sense? I'm going to assume it does make sense. While I am here, I want to make a wash. And I want to talk about glazing. So I am putting a bunch of water in my pans. So if I just want a little bit of a soft color, I can just mix it right in my brush. I can mix it right on the paper. But if I want a reservoir of it, then I need to make a little bit of it. So this looks almost identical to that. Let's see what happens when I paint it. I'm going to have to move out yet again. So when I paint it, as dark as this looks, it's very pale when I paint it, right?
Right.
So another technique that we will be doing is glazing. So if I take that pale green, I can mix it right on top of another color. Let me do one more. Now, if I've got a lot of water on my brush, it'll all sort of mush together. But you can see there's the blue with a glaze of yellow green. There's the green with it.
And
so
you did the glaze while it was wet, right? The paper was wet.
the paper is not that wet. It's
Okay.
wet-ish. You can do it. It is easier to control when it's dry. I did it when it was wet. Okay, I almost froze. So let me go back to this picture again, because when you look at it, you can see this is that glazing technique. I don't even know if I did the pale yellow first or the darker colors, probably the pale yellow in terms of the order, but you can see lots and lots of layers of color. And you can really build your picture up when you're doing watercolor. So, I've explained that, but I haven't given you time to do it, have I? Let's try doing a glaze. Get something you can put some water in. I got to figure out another color I want to glaze with, and try a glaze. So I'm going to try a blue glaze. So, excuse me?
Me too.
Oh, and what I also need to do while you guys are glazing, I realize I need to, I don't have any sap green and I'm feeling very deprived.
Need another color.
Oh,
That's privilege. When not having a sap green makes you feel deprived. I have a great affection for certain colors. And there are a lot of colors like the cadmiums and the phthalocyanines that I've been working with for decades. And then there's some new colors like, oh my goodness, I love that. And then there's this brand new pigment, a really expensive new pigment. It costs like $150 for a tube. But I think it's supposed to be wonderful. But I think I'm going to forego that one. I think it's called IMC Blue. Anybody? I read about it in the Times. Anybody else hear about it? All right, I've got my green. How's everybody doing with their glazing? Does anyone have any questions? So these are techniques that you can use doing this very, we're doing some level of realism, but these are also techniques that you can use with something abstract. Let's try red glaze. If you want it to be harder and sharper, then you would wait until each layer dries. But that is, you have to decide what you want your picture to look like. Does anybody have any questions or comments?
Hi, Dr. Flax. I have a question, and sorry if I missed this. What differentiates a glaze stroke versus a regular brush stroke? Is it like the order of the water in the paint or something else?
Glazing and watercolor is not a term that I knew about until last week. And basically all it means is you put one color down, and when you put the next color on, if it's not mushing together like wet into wet, it's glazing. And welcome. And if the names and the definitions help you understand what you're doing, if they help you paint and think in a more organized way, great. But if the terminology is like, huh, then throw it out the window. It's not useful to you. It's a way of talking about what happens when we put one color on top of another color and you can see them both. I think that's a pretty good answer. So we need to figure out, what does a snowdrop look like? And yeah. What I did not do is I did not get a colored background. But this is gonna help me. So yeah, there we go. Water is not going to hurt that. So they're wonderfully delicate flowers. They're like little bells. Some of them are more open and more closed. So in drawing our snowdrops, you have this little kind of oval that it's all in. You have a curve, which is not really that easy to see on any of these. That's the problem with reality. It's always more confusing than the idea in your head, but there's a little curve thing here. There's a part of the stem is higher than the curvy thing that the flower emerges from. There's the actual stem. There are 3 petals which can be closed or open. And then there's the guy that comes down with like a little soft upside down green heart on it. So this is what an actual snowdrop looks like. So everybody should get out. I'm putting this back in my wash the brushes water. Probably not the best idea. Everybody should get out a pencil and some paper to draw on. I would say just regular drawing paper so you can make mistakes on it and not worry about it. We are going to draw some snowdrops, and let me get my snowdrop drawings before I talk about it. Actually, I can probably draw right on top of them. For me, maybe not for you, but for me, when I want to paint something, when I want it to look realistic, if I draw it, if I really understand it, it's much easier for me. Then I can begin to analyze it. So there's space on this paper. Let's get this a little higher so you can see what I'm drawing. And there are lots of examples on my Pinterest. Okay, tapped. How are we doing for time? We're doing lovely for time. So there's that little, you can probably hardly see that on the screen. I'm going to get closer. I'm going to try and make 3 of these. So there's that little oval shape. In terms of the actual snowdrop, the bottom of it is straight-ish, but it's straight. Oh, there's a lot of wrinkles. It's straight. Do you like the green paint on my finger? And it's straight the way your wrist is straight. Your wrist is not a flat line. Your wrist
Is
has,
it possible to show us a picture of a snowdrop too at the same time?
I can show you one, but if I do that, the screen will be too small. If you have a second device, you can look at something on your second device.
In the PDF that everyone was sent
And
this morning.
you
there
were
lots of
all sent
images.
a PDF with pictures of snowdrops.
Okay.
So you do have those materials, and I don't want to make this hard for people to see.
Okay, got it.
So there's that first little bit. Stem is the little curvy guy. There's the curvy guy. And then you've got, I'm definitely going to run out of space for the leaves here, so I'm just going to fake it. There's the guy coming over. Now, the basic shape is like a bell, like a ball, like a triangle. If I look at the snowdrop, this is what it looks like. You will seldom see the snowdrop like this, but this will help you understand the form. How many petals? 3. It's a monocot. It's got those leaves with straight veins. And here is the shape. It's sort of maybe like a spoon. Does that feel like a spoon? And you can see the lines on it. So even though my drawing is flat, I'm drawing something that has, and this one's much more closed. Those spoon, and as the flower matures, the petals kind of extend and widen and the whole thing gets bigger. So the closed ones, you just make it so it looks like a drop. The more open ones, you have some spatial stuff going on. I was going to make the middle one, but I think I want to have two of them on the side. So it's kind of narrow at the top. And then I've got that little, so what I'm showing there is that guy with the heart in it, but I'm not showing as much of it because I'm making the petals more closed. And maybe a little bit from the back one, or I can make it quite open. And when I make them more open, I have to decide, do I want it like this with the guys on the side? Do we want it like this? So as I rotate it in space, oh, don't do that. My phone's going back and forth between portrait as I attempt. You will see different parts of the flower. And when you look at a bunch of snowdrops, you're going to see them with all different kinds of places in space. So there is the flower. The leaves are pretty easy. It's basically two parallel-ish lines. And the leaves, when I picked my snowdrops, I did not pick leaves. I want to make sure that my snowdrops continue to grow. So I want the leaves to provide nourishment. It's basically two parallel lines. If you want to make them spread out more and more open, you can do that. If you want to make them higher, as the snowdrop comes up, the leaves get taller and longer until finally the flower's gone and the leaves are way up high, looking kind of strappy and ugly. But we keep them in our garden because we want more snowdrops next year.
So rude.
Corinne's giving me a hard time because I'm dissing on the snowdrop foliage. Ah,
So are you gonna give everybody time to draw now?
yeah.
How much time?
How much time? Let's take 5 minutes and draw some snowdrops.
Can you mute yourself? Mute yourself on Zoom for a second.
Debatable. Okay, if you've come in late, what we are doing is we are about 1 minute into 5 minute getting comfortable drawing snowdrops.
Everybody is here.
Does anybody have any, and again, if you have your PDF, you have some actual snowdrops to look at. Actually, I did those without looking at a photograph. I'm impressed.
So what are you doing now, Louise? Those circles?
I'm going to talk about shading.
Oh, okay.
You do not have to do, I am making a demonstration as we speak, to, which I hope will make it easier to see shading.
Okay, thank you.
And everybody still has 2 more minutes to play around with drawing snowdrops. So if you finish one snowdrop, or if you have one you don't like, do another one. I mean, I made many drawings of snowdrops. They're more on Corinne's desk, right, Corinne? Oh, that's. Like that one, like the way. This one's really muscular. Very fond of that one. Not terrible. That feels like about 5 minutes. All right, so Sylvia said, what was I doing? I thought I'm going to be talking about shading, and I don't have great resources to talk about shading because we aren't really in 3 dimensions. If I were in a classroom, I would show you something in one part of the room that's softly lit. So if you look at my finger, my hand, you can see there are light parts and dark parts. Anything that's not in darkness or completely even light, you're going to see light and dark stuff. If I put my hand over by the window so the sunlight's on it, it's going to look more like this. Very sharp contrast. Depending on where the light is, it's going to be, the shadows will be in a different place. So the shadows, the light's coming from here, the shadows are there. Light's coming from there, they're my shadows. So it is changing. You as the artist decide what parts of your picture are going to be in light and shadow, and the shading that you do will make it 3-dimensional. If you don't want your picture to look 3-dimensional, you don't have to use shading. So when I translate this into paint, the shadows have to be in different places. Don't worry about how we're going to make the shadow color, because that's what we're going to do. Whoop, I just went, I'm alive, I'm lively now, yes?
Yes.
I froze.
Yes.
Sorry, got carried away. What we're going to do next is experiment and figure out how to make a nice shadow color using a wash. And then what we'll do is we will draw whatever snowdrop we want with a light wash, put some shadows in it. Then we will darken it a bit. I guess this came next. Add yellow. So basically you can see what I did is I made like 5 different beginnings, and then each one I completed a bit more, except I don't think I see the last one because, oh, I guess maybe this is the last one. I'm not even sure. Although then having done that, I thought I didn't really think that the definition of the snowdrop foliage was dramatic enough. So then I did this one. And again, you can be very, very free. You'll see I wasn't getting enough pop, so I began to add red and blue. So you can do whatever you want. You don't have to, oh my God, it has to be this color, it has to be that color.
So what should we get ready now?
So I have a drawing pad here, so I am going to go back to my watercolor paper. You can definitely work on the those pads that say all media, but boy, I was so good about doing this.
It's okay. No worries.
Okay, so I found in looking at the paintings I did on the all quote unquote all media, they really did not look at the color, just didn't have the right snap. So what I want to do with this is I want to have part of my picture be my picture and the other part be my palette. The other part be my palette where I'm going to show the colors. So I'm actually going to use a straight, this isn't called a straight edge. What is this called? A right,
I'm not the
a
one to-
corner,
Triangle? Is it a
a
triangle?
triangle. I love these because this way I know I've got a, I know I've got a 90-degree angle, and I try to always feel the edges of my paper. This is my arena. Some of you I know will want to do one flower. Some of you will want to do 2. Some of you will want to do many. I think the best compromise for me, so everybody has more or less what they want, is I'm going to do 2. If you want to do more, do more. If you want to do 1, do 1. If you want to have several pieces of paper that you're working on at once, that's fine. Whatever's going to work for you. So what I'd like you to do is to make a few washes that would be good shadow colors. So I've mixed a blue and a purple. Shadows are not black. I'm sure there are places where you could use the color black when you're painting, but black is just, it's not going to give you a good, soft, natural feeling. And certainly when you're making the shadow on white, it just, there's a lot of color in there. It may not be intense color, but there is a lot of color in there. So ways of getting, that's nicely shaded, isn't it? I don't want to really see, even though it's soft light, there's a lot of, you can mix a brown and a blue together. You can use Payne's gray, but figure out a nice shadow color that you're going to be happy with. You know, and if you like using black, use it. I personally don't recommend it, but if you love the way it looks, hey, it's your painting.
What blue do you use?
I would recommend using an ultramarine blue
Okay.
for two reasons. One is it's not a very intense color. If I use this blue, there's a lot more color. It's going to have too much chroma.
Yeah.
And it, you know, but again, I could bring it down. I would not use, I actually don't see any, I wouldn't use a cerulean blue. That's fun to use in the foliage. Actually, let me blob some down. You know, and color is so sensual and personal. You know, I have the colors that you know, a color like that, there's my cerulean. I don't see a lot of green in shadows, and this is a pretty green blue. This is a great blue to glaze with for your foliage because it won't dull your yellows. It won't make a dull green with yellow. So this is a great blue. It's just not the best blue for shadows. Your phthalo blue, not as good for shadow, too intense, too green. Payne's gray is one of my favorite colors. I really love it. Is this Payne? I'm pretty sure this is a Payne's gray. And then another color that I just discovered as I was playing around for this workshop is Davy's gray. And that's a really nice green gray. And I also discovered an interesting gray called neutral tint. So there are a lot of different colors out there, fun to play with. All right. At this point, I hope you've made more progress mixing a batch of a shadow color than I have, because I don't have a shadow color that's looking like too much chroma. So I want to get some gray in it. And you really have to try your colors out. Yeah. So if you put too much paint on, if it's too dark, I radio silence again. If it's too dark, you will, if it's too dark, have your paper towel. So if I make this line and I think, oh my God, I didn't want that there, I can blot it. There's still a little bit left, but there's a lot less. So let me make another line I don't want, just to show you, you know. I mean, yes, it's there. If I want a pale white paper, it's been marred, but this is nothing. And before I paint anything else, there were two two stories I wanted to tell. So the one thing is when I was teaching and my kids weren't getting their work done and they would be sitting there with a white paper, they'd say, I'm making a polar bear in a snowstorm. So how do you show the shadow of white? That's what we're doing. Even, you know, we want to have the shadow on that polar bear, on that snowdrop. And the other thing, and this is a story I heard that I was told in art school, it was in a life drawing class. And the guy, the teacher looked at the student's picture and said, what is that shadow on the model's stomach? Because there's this big blotch on the model's stomach. And it turned out they were working in a beautiful space. There was a skylight, obviously not a translucent one. And there was a cat sleeping on the skylight. And the man had painted the shadow of the cat. So I'm saying this because when you are working from photographs, you want to paint the essence of what you're painting. That beautiful naked model. You do not want to paint the shadow of the cat on the skylight. So just because something is there in front of you in a photograph, it doesn't mean you have to put it on your paper. Look at what you're doing so it looks the way you want it to look. And not painting the shadow on the skylight is something that I metaphorically have to say to myself. And I really think anybody who works from photographs has to say that. You have to understand the nature of it. So let me stop blathering on and start painting. So what I want to do is I know I want to make.
I have a question. Did you make the shadow out of purple and the ultramarine?
No, I used some red. I used some red and some. I did not use any purple. I used maybe a touch of red,
With the ultramarine.
Payne's gray,
Okay.
you know, but because you're not worrying about making, right, that's too, so what I'm seeing now is my scale isn't right. So I've got to make this a little bigger. And because it's so pale, I'm not going to worry about it. I am just going to, I'm assuming, yeah, it's not easy to see. If you don't feel comfortable drawing with the brush, you can do this very lightly with pencil. What you need to be aware of is if you make, I'm going to really exaggerate here. If I draw like this, I will not be able to hide that if I draw really darkly. If I draw very tenderly, if you're not, I'm very
I can't even
comfortable.
see that line.
If you draw tenderly, if somebody looks closely at it, they'll see it. But if you, and the other thing you can do is if you don't like the idea of drawing with a graphite type pencil, you can draw with a colored pencil. Can you see that, Corinne? This is the color I'm drawing with. But any light, you know, obviously a dark colored pencil, but if you've got yellows or pinks or light greens. So if drawing with the brush isn't comfortable, don't do it. So at this point, I hope everybody's made a shadow color and they are painting with it. I don't feel I in on that enough. Okay, that's looking bell-like. So if you want to watch me, great. If you want to start your own drawing, great. Can't watch me because I went dead again. So I hope everybody's painting their face. So there's a leaf, and I don't have to worry too much about which one is going to be in front, because I can establish that when I make things darker.
Dr. Flax, quick question. Is there a correlation between the tightness of the bud and the tightness of the leaves to the stem? Like, does a less mature flower that is a tighter bud still keep its leaves closer to its stem typically? Or is there not really much correlation and some of the leaves flop open at various points?
I would say somewhat. There's some correlation, but I don't think it's. I'd have to look through all my photographs of snowdrops. But in terms of just even picking them today, I picked, there are a lot of them at this point. There are a lot of them that are too far gone to be good to pick. And I almost think it may be different varieties, because some of the snowdrops are quite delicate and slim in their flowers as compared to I don't know if I'm, but you can see this one looks quite rounded and this one looks quite elongated. So there, and also the green on the part that's inside those white ones is different. So I don't know if that's, and even this part, and I'm sorry, I don't know the name of that, is different on different varieties. So it may be that the leaves on different varieties, or it may be growing conditions. I mean, I had not seen any snowdrops growing in grass. And then yesterday we were taking a walk and there were snowdrops, just a huge bunch of snowdrops growing in grass. I don't know how many of you see snowdrops in your, certainly in the city, you're not going to see that many.
Depends on where you go.
All right, that's good enough. Has everybody had a chance to sketch out a snowdrop in their with their shadow color? Maybe, sort of, kind of.
Sylvia says yes.
I'm gonna,
We have about an hour left. Mom.
yeah. I have no idea if that's too much time or too little time. Let's hope
It's always too little.
So I've called this the shadow color, but I haven't made any shadows with it. So figure out where you want the light to come from. You can always go back if you need more shadows, but you can see in this one, and this is pretty loose and free, kind of on this side and down. You can see in this one, right side, left side. And you can also use your shadow color to help show where the petals are, but definitely establish your shadows. Now there's a space over here where this is out of drawing. This is too bumpy, but I'm not super worried about it as long as I know that that's there. When I start doing the background, I will be able to fuss with it. Well, we can talk about backgrounds later. After my shadow is done, there are lots and lots of ways to think about how to do your leaves and the stems. In this one, I'm starting with a yellow and then I'm working green in, and you can see the colors I'm using. You can see the glazing. You can see working out how my shadow is going to be. You can see experimenting with the different greens. Lots of different choices for how you want to do your leaf and your stem with the greens. If you want to work with yellow, great. You can start with a yellow base. If you don't want to work with a yellow base, you can work with a mainly green base. I would not recommend working with a really bright, bright, bright green, because if I work with a green that's too harsh, too strong, might not look natural. So think of it, if you want it to look more natural, you will have to dull your green down a bit, but you can always dull it down with a glaze. So figure out if you want to do a yellow based one or a green based one, and start establishing the lines of your foliage. If you want to draw it with a wash first, so you can go back into it, that's fine. I'm having a hard time seeing this, but in the same way that I drew my shadow, and it's possible that my shadow color is going to be too pale. This is sort of turned into a wash. But I'm not worried about it because I know I can go back into it. And these stems are too thin.
Your screen froze.
As soon as I get interested and like really captivated by what I'm doing, I forget to, I'm just sort of making art and talking about it. I don't think about my devices. Might be a relief for you guys, right? All right, that's gonna work. That's definitely gonna work. So that's looking a little on the pale side. So let's make it more intense. And if I can't get this green to make it more intense, I'll mix something into it. So over here, I don't know if you can see it. Let me make sure you can see it. This is a little dry brush. Can you see how it sort of jitters and doesn't make a clean edge? You can see some of the texture. That's what happens when there's not a ton of paint on your brush and you get that dry thing going on. Again, this is a pretty loose picture, so I'm not too worried about it. At this point, what I'm seeing is this is a little symmetrical. Don't love that, but I'll live with it. Maybe I'll blob something over on the side with a different color later on. This is just for me to remember that. I'm not worried about these purple things. I know I'm going to have to go back in and make the shadows more intense. I'm going to have to get some greens in here. But the thing I'm most concerned about is getting a little bit more stuff in the background. I want to just take a second and talk about choices for your background. So this one has this fun, weird, grassy thing going on. This one, let me touch this, has nothing. This one has grassy stuff. This is the first time I've had to get up to look for examples. Excuse me? Oh, I certainly will. Here, I'm going to throw pictures at you. Little bird told me I'd frozen. You can just throw a wash in. This is a very nice way of avoiding the polar bear and the snowstorm look. You paint the white by the stuff around it. This one, nah, not in love with this. And again, a wash, pulled stuff. So there are lots of different ways you can do the background or no background at all. It is your choice. Touch you. So I think what I'm going to do, because I know I'm going to want to go back into my shadows and I don't want them to bleed. So I want this color that I'm doing to have a chance to dry. Is I want to get some yellow in there, and whenever you're going to work with a pale color, it's always a good idea to wash your brush off a bit more than you think you need to. I'm saying that because I just saw some gray begin to blob into my yellow. All right, that may be a little strong. Let's see. I think I'm going to go back to my weaker yellow. Yeah, that's a little softer. So that's going to help me get into that. And I'm just going to add some foliage while I'm here. I'm going to get some of that grassy quality. I've noticed as I've been doing this, I still have a lot of those Asian workshop that kind of Asian sensibility. And I'm, really seeing what kind of a mark am I making with my brush? What does it feel like? And the other thing this is going to do is this soft yellow is going to work very nicely with what's essentially a soft purple. It'll push the purple into looking more purple, looking more chromatic.
What yellow did you use?
I think it was a cadmium yellow light, but it might have been a nickel yellow, or it might have been a Windsor yellow. You want to use, so when I think of yellows, I think of yellows that would be easier to mix with blue, and yellows and are closer to blue, and yellows that have more orange in them. So this yellow has a little bit more orange in it as compared to this. How can I talk to you about colors if you can't see them? Okay, so let's, and I know I talked about this in the thing about colors. I'm going to run out of space here. So here is, I believe, a cadmium yellow medium. But the important thing is the difference between these two yellows, which is pretty, well, it's not that, it's more subtle on my paper than it is on my screen. But this one's got a tiny bit of orange in it, and that one's more lemony. And if I want to make greens, any red that's in my yellow is going to dull my green. Now, sometimes I might want a dull green, but it's easy to make colors dull. That's easy. It's easy to make mud. It's not easy to keep colors clean. All right, so I'm looking at this and it's beginning to take shape, but it still is looking too soft to me, although I really like what that yellow did to the background. So I think if I work with a darker green, so this green just is not quite doing it for me. So I think what I need to do is maybe work some dark blue into it. What will that give me? I'm going to get another sheet of paper here. No, I don't want to work on that. I've clearly put too much paint on here, so That definitely looks darker than what I've got there. So let's start working on this. Let's establish the line of this. This is also a little too,
When you put in the yellow background, did you wet the paper?
no,
Oh, you just did a really light wash.
right. I really try and control what's on my brush. Wetting the paper is definitely a very accepted watercolor technique, but I'm trying to have a bit more control here. And I've done so much watercolor, not that I'm a quote unquote watercolorist, but I've done enough painting with watercolors. So figuring out what to put on my brush is very natural to me. And the other thing is I quote unquote cheat. I always, somebody's got some yellow paint on her finger. I always make that first mark on my paper so I know what I've got. Watercolor is not as forgiving as other media, certainly much less forgiving than oils or acrylics, but it's very exciting and spontaneous, and stuff, little accidental things happen, which are nice. So I want to keep on working with that color, but I don't want it to be so intense. So I'm putting it in the water. And I think I want to make a glaze with that. So again, I'm using that paper, so I'm pretty sure of what I'm going to get when I put it to here. And I also can see that my shadows are too weak. And I'm going to go back into them to make them a little more dramatic. I know I need to get something dark here to anchor it, but I'm not sure what color it's going to be yet. So I've got a red, kind of a blue red. Now that color would be nice here as part of my anchoring colors, but it's probably because the red in it will, but that's way too red for the shadow on the white. Way too red, but I like it there. That's a little chromatic. When I talk about something being chromatic, oh man, I just got water on my phone. Great, but I've got one of those ballistic cases.
Just a warning, it's 12:20.
It's 12:20, so we're going until
1.
I think we're in good shape.
Just giving you a heads up.
So let's get a little more definition in here. That's looking, so this is like the pulled work I did. Remember that we did at the beginning. So I have that line and I pull it. Yep, that's looking like a flower. Now, the other thing that's going to help my flower look more snowdrop-ish is if I get the little green heart in. Get that stuff in there. I don't think I'm going to do one with the white and the heart. I think I'm just going to do the whole green thing and then maybe do a darker heart. And get a little more shadow in there. And get some shadow in there. Okay, what next? I think I want to get some. So I have to laugh. I've got many, many brushes. You can see the brushes here. I have been doing all of this with a number 12 Polar Flow, which I think was the brush that came with, it was the brush that came with the Bruce plein air painting
It's a good
kit. It is a good brush. And it gives me, I can make a beautiful thin line. I can do a wash. It's a very useful brush. Aren't those nice colors? But we're out of space, so I'm looking at this and I'm still wanting to do more with the background. So oh, that is another hint I wanted to give you. So I have a bunch of palettes I'm working on here. I've been working upstairs and downstairs. This is not a good official palette. I think this is a bead box, and I read this in one of the books. If you're going to be using yellows for flowers and warm colors where you're mixing reds in them, and if you're going to be using yellows for greens where you're mixing blue in them, don't just have one, because I don't know if you can see this, but I got some red in my yellow because I want to get a more orangey yellow. But then if I needed it to make greens, I'd be up the creek without a paddle. But because I have several yellows, I still have good clean yellows.
Do you have the same yellow in each of those little sections?
Some of them are different, but some of them are the same. What I'm saying is use a double yellow. Use two sections with the same yellow, so you will be able to control what you're doing. Does that make sense? I need a yes.
Are you saying so that you're not, you don't have to worry about dirtying the yellow or something?
Exactly, because I have just dirtied this yellow. I will not want to use this unless I want to make a really dull green. That's not that useful. This yellow doesn't have anything in it. So, and this was something, I had not, a lot of the lessons that I've taught so far for the Bruce, I've taught a version of these lessons before. I have not taught this kind of a lesson before. So I thought, well, let me look at different books. What do books say? And some of the books, I thought, wow, this is really, there were some quite useful things in some of the books. And I thought the idea of having multiple palette blobs of a color that you use a lot of, just the way if you're using acrylics, you always need a lot of white. But why put it in one blob? Put it in separate places so you can make a bunch of different things when you're mixing with your white. You know, think about how you're going to use the color and what will happen when you use it.
So are you saying that in your palette, you know, just the palette you're using for today, or, you know, you wash that out when you're done with it? Or are you saying that, you know, if you set up like a permanent palette, that you might have more than one of the same yellow?
For a permanent palette, I would say definitely for today, because I know, and even more when we're doing daffodils, and even more when we're doing tulips. Today, we don't need a lot of pure yellow. We're not doing much with yellows and with oranges and reds. But with those other classes, we will be. But any color that you know you're going to use a lot of, any pale color that is easy to dirty, doesn't it make sense to have several little parts of it so you have the pure color to work with? You know, if it doesn't make sense to you, don't do it. But to me, I thought, wow, what a cool idea. You know, it's like those kitchen hints in Cook's magazine, like, oh, why didn't I know how to do that? That's really cool. Because our paints and our water and our colors, they're just tools, right? They're just tools. How do we want to use our tools? So as I'm talking, I'm looking and I'm thinking, you know, what is my picture saying to me? What do I see happening? What do I want to happen? What do I like about it? What do I not like about it? What action can I take? I don't really like this transition. I know why I don't like it, because that's in the wrong place. So how am I gonna, I don't like what's happening at the transition here. And I think this needs to be softened. And that probably needs to be strengthened. I could also maybe pop a little pale green behind that. Might work, might not work. Yep, that's better. I don't want to lose my orange though. Up and radio silence. So we've got about half, we've got about half an hour. I would say maybe 15 minutes to paint and 15 minutes to look at our work and talk about it. Is that about,
Look at them, not at me.
does that sound about right? Are there questions or things that you know, and if you've completely finished your picture and want to start on another idea, go for it. Does anybody have any questions? I see Sylvia shaking her head. Okay, we'll keep painting. Oh, I should have gotten. I should have gotten you. I never got my daughter a chair. I am a bad mother.
It's okay.
And of course, there are no chairs in this room. You couldn't have gotten one. You didn't want to paint.
I have work to do for the consent agenda
I-
for the
I am
board
so-
meeting.
Alrighty. Do I want some soft ultramarine blue in this? That is the question, and I don't know. Mistake. Let it stay open. Make that darker. I bet we're gonna have radio silence again. Bet you're going about to go dark. If I were teaching in a real classroom, I would be thrilled with this level of silence and concentration. But on Zoom, it's just odd. But a lot of odd things about these times.
use to make the green darker?
I use blue. And if the blue doesn't work, I use like a burnt umber. And also Payne's gray or Davies gray or what's it called? Neutral tint. Even dark green. I'll do a little. I'll do a demonstration. That'll, because my painting's done for now. I can't really see clearly enough that there's anything that it needs to have. So let's take 2 greens at least. Let's make this a little darker. This green's a nice color, but it doesn't have a lot of pigment in it. Here's another, really nice, bright, chipper green. Not a lot of pigment. I think that's olive green. So here's this blue. Well, that blue just sort of dominated it, didn't it? That's kind of a nice green, isn't it? So I want to make sure I don't have any of that old green. Let me wash that off.
What color blue is that?
I think it says blue of Berlin.
Oh.
I mean, I have so many old watercolors, but I mean, let's try it with an ultramarine. This I know is an ultramarine. I mean, I have a bunch of old Shinhan watercolors that are so old, they don't make those. This is clearly a weak color because the blue just dominates it. So I get pretty similar colors with my ultramarine, but you can see this is a little deeper, a little more like a navy than my ultramarine. That ultramarine just sort of glows, doesn't it? If I use my gray, and I think I'm pretty sure this is Payne's gray. Maybe a little light for Payne's gray. And that's the other thing, depending on the company that makes it, each color is going to be different. So the gray is just way too strong. And let's get a brown. I don't even know if I have a brown. I don't have a, oh, this is one of my new favorite colors. This looks like a red, but it's brown madder. Now, what's not nice about a lot of the matters is they fade. But I realized any work on paper is going to fade. You should not have works on paper exposed to sunlight. So the madder was way too strong, but I knew that was going to happen. So here is this color with madder. So that makes an interesting. I hope, actually that's that.
So hold it up a little bit higher.
Hold it up so we can.
Fire?
See.
Yeah,
Oh, I love it. Oh, wow.
very nice.
Well, I don't have the cream colors, the tube colors. I only used the flat colors, so I didn't have all the colors, so I had to make it up.
Yeah, but that's how we learn. I mean, if I had to do this picture with red, yellow, and blue, and maybe Payne's gray, you find a way.
As long as you had Payne's gray.
I don't want to live without my Payne's gray.
Who would like to share next? Should I just call
do
on
it,
people?
Do it.
Okay, I'm gonna do Rebecca and Sarah. You guys are next.
The only reason I'm saying do it in order.
Very pretty.
Wow.
Very nice.
Wow.
Awesome. You guys are making me feel like a good teacher. Woo, it's so nice to
You
see.
are.
This was a good one, Dr. Flax.
It's a good time of year for snowdrops. Janice, you're next.
Oh, boy.
Grabbing each person.
Oh, very nice.
Ooh, you
Please.
worked big. I love it.
Oh,
Hey.
that's beautiful.
That's great. Kathy, you're up next. Oops. To replace spotlight.
Oh.
Hold on, it looks blurry. Wait a second.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. It looks nice, but it's like through a clay.
Oh, there you go. Now you're
focused.
sharp.
Oh, lovely.
So I just want to say I'm very slow to get going on doing painting, but this is the first time that I painted something without trying to draw it first, and just trying to paint in it just made me kind of feel freer about it.
That's what you want, right?
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Peggy, you are gonna be coming up next.
Can you see?
Yes.
They're dancing.
I
They are
have,
dancing.
I have to do pencil first, and then I guess number 2 pencil's too dark. I can't erase it always. What number pencil should I use?
If you can get an H pencil, but if I can make a 4B light. So if you don't have that ability to be light,
I don't.
use a colored pencil.
Okay, I'll try that next time.
Pale blue. Is a pale, especially
It's fun.
pale blue is going to be great.
Okay, Sylvia, you are next.
Well, I always feel like I always feel like I'm in kindergarten in these classes. So this is what I did. I had a good time. I enjoyed watching Louise painting.
Sylvia,
And
you look good. You did
It's-
good.
it's fine. Thank you. It's a good thing I'm not a competitive person. But thank you, Louise. It was really, I love color, working with the colors, and your instruction was really helpful. And it was great. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Layla?
Lila?
Ryla, I'm sorry.
Yeah, here I am. Where am I? Is that right?
Wow.
Oh, I love it. They're beautiful.
What a beautiful shadow you
I-
made.
Well, I just plopped the paint on in wet. It just did what it did.
But that's, if watercolor isn't going with the flow, what is, right?
Right, exactly.
I just want to say, I think the results in this class are the best of any of the classes I've taught so far. In all the classes, there have been like 4 or 5 people who did something outstanding and everything was interesting. I am really genuinely loving everything I see. I'm so proud of you all. And I realize I haven't seen quite
Yeah.
everybody yet, but I'm impressed.
Catalina? Are you in Spain? Hi.
We love the red wall. It's a little
think she's
hard
in-
to hear you.
She's-
Looks like you're muted.
Yeah, now?
Yes, now.
Oh, okay. I don't have very many watercolors. I paint other things, but I have very few colors, so.
Catalina, are you coming to us from Spain? I know that somebody was zooming in from
Right.
Spain. Amazing.
Yeah, I'm a friend of Lila's,
Oh,
but I used to live in Greenwich, and so I know the Bruce Museum really well, so I decided to join it.
So, I mean, I'm honored for everybody, but to have an international group, that only happens with origami. But I'm impressed.
But blame it on Lila de Bruni.
all right, Lila,
right.
it's your fault.
Thank you.
Julie, you are up next.
All right. So I appreciate the guidance. Thank you. This is what I.
You'll have to make your screen normal. You're on some weird.
Yeah.
You have to get rid of.
Oh, I'm sorry. I have a background.
It's cool. It's like you're painting in a cloud.
Sorry. There. So I colored mine in.
No,
Just a different take on it.
fun. It's good. Oh, good for you.